Hello, this is Dan Nowman Niswander, and you're watching the Nowman Show. I'm back here in Pasadena Media studio, and I need to do a monologue. There's just a lot that's been going on the last several years. Haven't been in this room for the most part, and it's just a lot, to ask questions about, to contemplate, food for thought. First of all, how did I get into serious activism? I've been asked that question. And for me, it really started with music, because I was always a Beatles fan, and John Lennon inspired me, perhaps even is the one who made me aware of the subject of peace, because of the Vietnam War. I was looking actually for information about a concert, a Paul McCartney concert in Indianapolis. And I already was there. I was popular in the music scene with a rock band, and I was always interested in doing some kind of charity other than just local-based charity stuff. And I came across Adopt a Minefield on Paul McCartney's website, and even though I was in Indiana, I always come back to California, once a year or so on vacation. So it was an event for an organization called Adopt a Minefield. And long story short, they asked me to be a media ambassador. They threw me in a Hollywood press corps. And there was a journalist next to me from ITN, which in Great Britain, and I had no idea what ITN was. I mean, I saw CNN, I saw Entertainment Tonight, I saw ABC, I saw, Access Hollywood, I think. And various newspapers, Los Angeles Times. I didn't know what ITN was, and the woman had a British accent. She said, well, think of it as like you have CBS, ABC, and NBC in Britain. At least at that time, they had the BBC One, BBC Two, and ITN. And I work for ITN, and I work for the show that's like your equivalent of the Good Morning America on ABC. He said, I've interviewed Paul McCartney before. He's going to come by here, and we'll do a full interview, and you can record it, and you own it, and So she was very helpful, and I learned a lot from her. A real professional, and so that got me interested in journalism, as well as I could say, hey, I'm a serious peace activist. The organization Adopt a Minefield asked me to write an article for their international newsletter the following year. I did some shows for them, with producing live rock music shows in Indianapolis, Indiana. They sent someone from the State Department, a naval officer, to come and speak. The highest ranked female naval officer in the U.S. military came to speak at our event, and it was a great night. We had a lot of good music, a lot of fun, and raised some funds and awareness for Adopt a Minefield, and I could share now more of what I understood about landmines. So that was basically my introduction to serious activism, and literally as a peace activist. And but it's very specific, right? It isn't just about peace. It's only really about landmines, and there are obviously so many different weapons and things that are used, especially nowadays. Even though they've pretty much eliminated landmines, what they created after eliminating landmine production basically was drone bombs. And so it's like, here we go again, right? And we're in it's just a crazy world, what can I say? And what we've been through with the pandemic. And it's just really more and more heightened my awareness of how important it is to be better educated about what's going on around me, and to be really a participant in community, and not just live in my own little world, and being introduced to that on an international scale really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and it continued on. I think the real thing that even made me more serious was the message, the basic messages behind Occupy Wall Street in 2011, 2012. And when I would go to Occupy Los Angeles in downtown Los Angeles at City Hall, I learned so much there. I went from, being aware of, let's say, a few issues to maybe 50 to 100 in a very short period of time. Also got acquainted and made friends with hundreds of people in a very short period of time. It was an amazing experience. And that's why we really need, consistent movements now, because that's how, if people want to really seriously change the world for the better, that's how you do it, is create a movement where people are all there together, building community, establishing relationships. And believe me, there's all kinds of dysfunctions and things that, you can't really talk about sometimes, because, there's always going to be issues between people. But the overall message was very clear that there is excessive income and wealth inequality. And by the way, here we are in the 2020s now. That has not changed. As a matter of fact, it's probably a lot worse now than it was in 2011 and 2012. I know that there's probably a lot more to report after 2019, but that information's not quite available yet as far as economically. I came across a study in the last several years that I did include in the Nowman Show that was released by the U.S. Congressional Budget Office itself, but it wasn't released until September of 2022. And it covered the subject of economic inequality, or shall I say distribution of wealth and income, over a period of time from 1989 to 2019. And there were three statistics that really I found, well, two in particular, especially shocking. The first one, the top 1% shared about 40% of the wealth. Actually, I'm sorry, about 1/3 of all the wealth produced in this country as of 2019. That was very similar to the data from 2010 to 2011. Back then it was about 40%, so it's about the same. But the things that really got my attention was the bottom 50% of the US population between 1989 and 2019 have been consistently sharing only about 2% of the wealth. That should be shocking to all of us, that many people, which would be right now, over that period of time, we would have been maybe 150 million people or so, have only shared 2% of the wealth for over 30 years. And here's another one, because all the, back during the Occupy period, all you heard about was like 1%, The top 10% as of 2019 was sharing 72% of the wealth. Think about that. The top 10%, that would be approximately 35.5 million people sharing about 3/4 of all the wealth that we create together. And my conclusion, and I'm not an economist, but I also know how to read and use critical thinking skills. That tells me we're in for some very big crises. We're already seeing things unfold now as it is, seeing the economy of China rise, for instance, and the BRICS economic union, and then this as an alternative to NATO because of NATO's operations right now. And that's a whole other story in itself. And even from the very beginning of this show, and even before 2015, I always tried to focus on solutions. But I know from my own personal life that you have to understand the actual problem or problems before you can really come to any actual solutions. And I experienced that in my own life. So that's how I look at all of this, is that it's hard sometimes to analyze what a real problem is, but it does help us to get to solutions, and the solutions do exist, and they're wonderful. It does require a lot of work. It's also, a lot of that work requires building relationships, building community, talking to each other. Let's talk. Don't hold in your feelings. Believe me, I have to work on that myself. The there are solutions. And we need a responsible healthcare system, and not just one that gets everybody covered where people go broke. We need a system that allows an equitable system to be in place so that it does allow everyone to be able to afford it if they do have to spend any money. So single payer healthcare has very important things that we can learn from. And there's even, if you look at socialist countries, they have good programs too. And by the way, there needs to be a lot of education about history and about what terms mean. And a lot of times you'll hear people say like, well, a centralized organizing, too much government doesn't work. Well, okay, that's true. But if your government system is an oligarchy where the corporations are running it basically, why is that centralized form of organizing better than any other? Just because it's privately owned. Because what we find is because of the way the system is set up, it isn't a free market. It allows a handful of people to get most of the wealth and the income. Now, how does that make any sense? So we really need realistic critique and analysis of what all these terms mean and what's actually going on. And two, all of us have heard the divide and conquer, kind of thing. That's been throughout human history. Leaders and warriors and dictators and whatever you want to call them, just words, they've been power hungry. And the way to stay in power is through different techniques of divide and conquer. And now with all the tools that are available, there's a lot of different ways, and money is used to create a lot of propaganda. It's used to create a lot of confusion, distractions, lies, deceptions. And these concepts are still being used to divide us up. And those are real problems. And we can come together and find solutions. There are lots of solutions. We can organize our enterprises and organizations a lot differently, where we organize them from the bottom up and not from the top down, to where there is more democracy. People have more of a voice. They can vote. They can genuinely vote, unlike our electoral process here in the United States, where you don't even know if your vote counts anymore. So we organize from the bottom up, right? And that changes what happens from the top down. In other words, it's more equitable. And I think we have to really take a look at the distribution of income and wealth. We really have to look at money in a realistic fashion, not negatively or positively. Just look at it, what is actually going on here. And then we can better understand how to make life better for everyone and not just for, let's say, the people at the top 10%. The thing I always think about the most on this television show was something that Kelly Carlin said in our conversation. Kelly is the daughter of the very famous comedian George Carlin.
When he did The Planet Is Fine, that was in 1992 on his Jammin' in New York show. And it was very controversial because, he wasn't saying don't try to save the planet, but he was saying the only reason you're trying to save the planet is because you're trying to save your life, your convenient life. Like, let's just get real about it.
Ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you're trying to save it so that you're not inconvenienced anymore. And if you really want to save the planet, then we would stop driving cars.
Yes.
And we would stop eating beef, I mean, like those two things would probably save the planet right now. We would probably be okay if we could do those two things.
That's right.
But we're really not interested in that. So, and now with all of our devices, it's just so anyway. So, he warned us about all of this. He saw it all coming. It's all about greed, and greed is all about ego. So it's all about, I want to make sure I have enough for me and my family. And we really haven't gotten past that.
All about greed, and it's all about ego. And, there's not a lot of humility there. That's why, I always go back to that, because I think about the importance of community and why we're all here together. We're all one, right? You don't take a certain group and say, well, they're not any good, you know, or this guy. I mean, I think we know when there's a problem, right? There have been certain leaders in just recent history. We can go back to the 30s, right, and the 40s. And there is one particular person that was part of a group that did genuinely create a lot of havoc on this planet, right? Probably the only real war that seemed to have had to have happened because of a real crazy person and a crazy organization that evolved around that person. But that just doesn't happen all the time. A lot of what we've been told is not true. And when you do real journalism and you dig deep and you find out a lot of the truth comes by not turning on your TV with what's called the mainstream media and know how to use critical thinking skills and figure out who is more likely telling you the truth, right? And I say follow the money if you want to find the lies and dig deeper otherwise, and you'll find the truth. I think one of the problems is once we identify, you know, who that very small group of people are who just want to seem to control everything, right? The other part of the problem we have to be honest about is ourselves. Particularly in this country, I mean, even with the unions, I mean, it's hard to get unions focused on standing up for their own interests, right? Because so many organizations get infiltrated by the very people that don't want these entities to exist. They don't want the workers to have more rights, so they get infiltrated, so they're ineffectual. But in Europe, if you look at Europe, the unions are a lot more organized and they're a lot more powerful, you know, standing up for the workers' rights in general. And they, interestingly, are using us as a role model, but from the past. Right? From like the 1930s when the unions were involved with putting pressure on the president and Congress to create the New Deal at the time. That's the kind of union organization that a lot of countries in Europe, especially more socialist hybrids, that's the kind of model they use as our old model from the 1930s, you know. And so we've kind of gone backwards. We need to kind of go back to where we used to be in certain ways in a modern context. And so I've noticed a lot of us, you know, we're so busy working, or we're so busy with this and that. A lot of people waste their time, you know, on their cell phones or in front of a computer when they could be, you know, engaging in person with other people, or they could be, you know, going to a march or to a meeting, a rally to talk about how to you know, create solutions, right, to solve problems. And I think there's some people doing that, but a lot of people are just kind of sitting on their rears. It takes all of us and not just a handful of people. I mentioned some of the solutions, and I want to end on, when I get to the end, I'm going to end on perhaps the first thing that I will do, and maybe you can help me share it virally on the internet, because it will be a subject that will come up more and more all the time, holiday times or not. Also, on this television show, what do you want to see more of? We've done a lot of stuff in 9 years on this show, coming into the 10th year, and we've done music. We've had in this very room here Robert Margoloff, who won a Grammy for Stevie Wonder's Intervisions album. Robert Shear's been in here, who used to write for Ramparts magazine and was an editor in the LA Times, taught at USC Journalism School, Annenberg School, and I learned so much about him in this very room here, talking about his interviews with former presidents and about what was going on at the time. He was very concerned about, you know, Trump being a candidate, a serious candidate, but he was likewise very concerned about the legacy of the Clintons. It was just a very interesting conversation. And there was live music in here, and just, it was a comedy show. It's just on and on and on. Just, we had so much fun. And what do you want to see more of? Let me know. And please check out the Nowman Show. Also, a three-part, so far three-part, there probably will be more chapters, but a three-chapter documentary series called New Renaissance. So if you want to know more about what I feel solutions are, check out that documentary in 3 parts, and it's called New Renaissance. I'm celebrating the 20th anniversary of the release of my second album, which is called Adventures in Wanderland, and as well as the 10th anniversary of the release of this book that I'll read from in a minute, The Universe According To Nowman. So some of the things that I've been doing. But before I get into that, when I was talking about solutions, I love this sticker here. Abolish human rentals, support worker cooperatives. So when workers make all the most important decisions themselves, that's a worker-owned cooperative. So in other words, in a traditional corporation, you have a board of directors, right? And let's say Amazon, maybe they have, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people in their board of directors, and those people, along with Jeff Bezos, the owner, make all of the most important decisions, all of them. And how many hundreds of thousands of employees do they have? And how much of the profits are they sharing with the workers? Well, when you have a worker-owned cooperative, everybody who chooses to be a worker-owner is the board of directors. So let's say Mondragon Cooperative Corporation in Spain that has over 70,000 worker-owners. Do you know how many people they have on their board of directors? Over 70,000, because they committed themselves to being worker-owners and not just workers. That is what this is about. This is why I support worker-owned cooperatives, because there's other types of cooperatives too, and they're all good in one way or another. It makes people aware, at the very least, that we have to work together as a cooperative, right? So every time you go into REI, that's a member cooperative, but it's not a worker-owned cooperative. But it still gives you this idea that, okay, you can do things differently than, let's say, a huge corporation would do. And also, I think it's very important that we remember the most important amendment of the Bill of Rights was and is the First Amendment, which is mostly freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, including where you can worship, but also in public where you can speak your mind, give your opinion. And if we lose the First Amendment, we lose everything. So just keep that in mind. That's why I support freeing Julian Assange. And I want to read from my book. This is about music. Music is one of those tangible, non-tangible things that somehow magically seem to connect us to what seems to be the invisible reality that we somehow know consciously is what is really going on as we live our day-to-day lives. It is analyzed as things such as notes, melodies, rhythms, sounds, compositions, instruments, recordings, groups, solo artists, live concerts, and so many unique and distinctive styles, writers, and players. It really is amazing how it just gets to the heart, the soul, the adrenaline, the passions, and a plethora of outward emotions and expressions. Perhaps the greatest thing about it is that we can just simply enjoy listening and are magically transformed or transported. What are you listening to now? This segment is called Communication. Human beings often find themselves in situations where there is miscommunication. Details can be very complex, and that explains why there seems to be so much misunderstanding. It's like trying to analyze the universe in one sentence. There are probably an infinitude of ways to do that, and I think we all do it every day, but along with the words, we must understand the meaning of those words, especially used in combination. This is where communication comes into our lives. Some people seem to be better at this than others, but we always feel better when we learn to communicate more clearly, more thoroughly, and more honestly. I mean, we feel better in every way, mentally, emotionally, and even physically and spiritually. There could be more to that as well, but I wanted to make the point that there are truly benefits to being great communicators. I'm not talking about just being good at selling something. It depends on how you even go about selling and what you're selling. Being Nowman, obviously I'm not trying to sell you on the idea of the present moment, but I'm at least attempting to communicate that awareness that I see as my mission. You can take it or leave it. I am just being present, and you are too. What would you like to communicate with me? I'm all ears. Are you anxious about the future and have regrets from the past? Well, you know what I have to say to that. Now is all that is real. The universe is complex, but the universal law of the eternal and infinite now is quite clear and simple. Be here now. How can we really have peace? And there's something that we all can do to be peacemakers. And I'm going to start with something right now.
Imagine all the people living life in peace. We want peace in this world. We can let it happen. We're here on this planet together. We want love in this world. Feel it in your heart. We're here on this planet together.
Peace is a global initiative, and unity is also a global initiative. And we need to really be diligent and serious about unity and peace and love. And John challenged the mainstream narratives of war. And also, he promoted the simple, profound messages of peace, love, and truth. Remember? Give me some truth! We're not getting a lot of truth. We haven't been getting a lot of truth, at least since 9/11, probably long before that. John stood up to the corruption in the establishment. But what are we doing? We need to ask ourselves what we're doing. Love is the answer, and you know that for sure. Love is a flower. You gotta let it grow. Love is the answer. Peace is the answer. Truth is where the ultimate answer will come from.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
It's not about me solely. I'm one individual, and you are one individual. Together we are all one.
All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Couple more times. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance.